Have you ever had an idea that sounded great in your head and which also had some pretty good intentions, and then you go on to turn it into reality, and at first it seems that people start to receive it very well, but then something unpredictable happens, and that once nice idea turns into something that you didn't expect, and not in a good way. Well, for Nike this was the case, and the shoe that we're going to talk about today may be one of the most infamous shoes ever. Well, except for this one. But that's a topic for another day. However, this shoe went through this weird transition from praised running shoe to being banned due to causing murders. This is the weird history of the Nike Cortez. To understand the Cortez, we first need to start at the beginning, and that is with Blue Ribbon Sports, the company that would become Nike. Founded by Phil Knight and Paul Bowerman in 1964, Blue Ribbon worked as a distribution company for Onitsuka Tiger's running shoes, the same company that would later on become Asics. Knight was a former track athlete at the University of Oregon, and Bowerman was his coach, so they both knew a lot about running shoes and what needs the average athlete had. While Onitsuka Tiger's running shoes were light and functioned well as a running shoe, Bowerman wanted to take it to the next level, so in 1966 Bowerman went on to create the Onitsuka TG24, the earliest version of what would become the Cortez. The TG24 was supporting a new feature that hadn't been seen in running shoes before, an actual midsole. While a simple addition, this helped create arch support for the shoe, and the TG24 went on to become the best-selling running shoe of 1966. The shoe would later go on to change its name to the TG24 Mexico due to Bowerman finding the name to have a more market-friendly title. This was also heavily inspired by the up-and-coming Olympic Games, which was set to take place in Mexico in 1968 with Bowerman and his team participating. That name, however, only lasted for a short time because Blue Ribbon and Onitsuka themselves wanted the shoe to have an even flashier name, so they changed it again to the TG24 Aztec due to Mexico being the home of the ancient Aztec Empire, and everything seemed to be ready for the Olympics. That was until Blue Ribbon received a letter in the mail from a town in Germany with a rather funny sounding name. That town, however, was home to Adidas, and they wrote Blue Ribbon to tell them that the name that they had chosen for their shoes had to be changed since the name Aztec proved to be too close to one of Adidas' spiked running shoes, the Azteca Gold, that was supposed to join the games as well. So Blue Ribbon had to change the name yet again, this time to the TG24 Cortez after the Spanish conquistador that conquered the Aztec Empire during the 16th century. An act of poetic justice, if you ask me. The TG24 Cortez went on to become a very successful shoe for the company, and the reasons for this was due to an up-and-coming jogging craze that was about to hit the US, a craze that Bowerman himself was partly responsible for creating with his jogging book simply called Jogging. Even though the TG24 Cortez was meant as a track shoe, Bowerman's improvement to the model over the years made it a very viable lifestyle shoe, and also a great shoe for jogging. All of this made the TG24 Cortez a bestseller for Blue Ribbon, but alas, more trouble was brewing on the horizon. Knight and Bowerman were, despite their success with Blue Ribbon, having second thoughts about keeping their relations with Onitsuka Tiger going, and instead went on to form Nike in 1971, named after the Greek goddess of victory. This in and on itself created some trouble with Onitsuka Tiger, but Nike then went on to sell the TG24 Cortez as the Nike Cortez, and it was this act that began the troubling battle with Onitsuka Tiger and Nike over the Cortez name and model. Surprisingly, in a lucky turn of events, the judge ruled that both companies were allowed to keep on selling the model, but only Nike was allowed to use the Cortez name. It's no secret that if this case had turned out differently, Nike might not have existed today, because according to Knight himself, quote, Nike was broke at the time, and if this went Onitsuka's way, Nike was done for, end quote. The Nike Cortez went on to become Nike's first ever official shoe and would go on to skyrocket in popularity with different celebrities wearing the model like Farrah Fawcett and Elton John. It would also go on to be featured in movies and shows like Forrest Gump and Seinfeld. And if this was where our story ended, it would be nice. But unfortunately, the Nike Cortez experienced some troubling times during the 80s. In the beginning of the 80s, the Cortez was more or less still just a nice shoe. It was beginning to be adopted by b-boys on the East Coast for its affordable price and lightness. But as the 80s went on, we saw the rise of the genre of gangster rap in LA, specifically with the group NWA. They, as well as many others, began blending the different elements of hip-hop with gang culture, and this included the Nike Cortez. Gangs having uniforms is nothing new. They usually consist of specific colors, clothes, and also sneakers. The Bloods were known to sport a variety of Reeboks, while the Crips were known to sport British Knight sneakers. And MS-13, who at this time was an up-and-coming gang in Los Angeles, who consisted of members of Latin American descent, and who would eventually become one of the most notorious gangs in the US, had a uniform too. And the sneakers of MS-13 were, of course, the Nike Cortez. The Nike Cortez became such an intricate part of the MS-13 gang culture image that if you were wearing Nike Cortezes at this time in LA, your best case scenario would be that a cop would stop you on your way and ask you questions on what you were doing. Worst case scenario, you'd get shot. Cortezes quickly became a hot topic during this time, and schools began banning this shoe due to its gang affiliation. And according to different sources at the time, there was an overall consensus on the streets that you did not wear Nike Cortezes unless you were ready for trouble. Even though this began in the 80s, the problems with the Nike Cortezes haven't completely gone away. As recent as 2013, there was an incident reported about a group of kids who were victims of a drive-by shooting. According to the kids, the shooting happened after one of the shooters pulled up to the kids in their car and began asking questions about why one of the kids were wearing Nike Cortezes. This problem has become so ridiculous that even MS-13 gang leaders are telling their own men to stop wearing Nike Cortezes because they are unknowingly incriminating themselves. This part of the Nike Cortez's history is so absurd and weird, and from what I can gather, I can't seem to find Nike themselves having made any kind of comment on the matter. And to some degree, I understand them. I mean, if you see this from a marketing perspective, this kind of advertisement is not something that you can buy. But on the other hand, when you see your first ever shoe gaining this kind of notoriety, it has to leave a weird taste in your mouth. If I was Nike, I would probably have made the same move. I mean, I think most of us would. And honestly, with this kind of situation, I mean, what can you do? But there is one question I would love to ask Nike, and that is, how do they see the Nike Cortez? Their first ever official release. Do they see it as something to be proud of? Do they see it as an achievement to the company? Or do they see it as something that should be forgotten due to its infamy? Okay, let's move on to talk about the shoe itself. The Nike Cortez comes in a full-on synthetic and leather upper alongside a durable gum sole with Bowerman's iconic herringbone pattern and of course the iconic Nike swoosh. One of the notable things about the Cortez is its nylon counterpart. Due to Bowerman's drive for innovation, he also went on to create a nylon version of the Cortez to make it lighter for his runners. He also went on to make a suede version too. Even though I wouldn't recommend this shoe for running in this day and age, I still think that the nylon and suede counterparts are a great look on the Cortez, and also a great choice if you decide to choose the Nike Cortez as a lifestyle shoe. The original Cortez lineup consisted of 3 pairs, with the most popular being the iconic white leather pair. Even though this shoe released almost 50 years ago and Nike has since then put up some great looking colorways, this one keeps popping up as the most popular Cortez out there. And if you love this model, it is without a doubt a must buy. The shoe looked great in '73 when it officially came out, and I still believe it looks good today. And talking about the Cortezes that Nike has released, there are plenty with different variations on the whole upper or just a swoosh. And remember, the shoe is available in different kind of materials as well. The Cortez have also seen some great collabs being put out, like the one done with Kendrick Lamar, Undefeated, Simple Icon, Exit Flying Hawk, and my personal favorite, the Mr. Cartoon pairs. This one especially, I think, perfectly captures what the Cortez is. A great looking shoe with a dark history. Okay, we're at the final part of the video, so what do I think of them? Well, it's kind of hard to say. I mean, I think they are a great looking shoe, and to personally think that this was Nike's first ever true release really baffles me because it was a very good try. The Cortez is definitely a shoe that holds a lot of history, more than I initially thought when I began researching for this video. But is the Cortez this classic, iconic sneaker that I see many people claiming it to be? I don't think so. The Cortez is a shoe that I think has lost its appeal, not due to it not being a good shoe, because when looking at different aspects like price, looks, etc., it is a good choice, but I think that it has been outperformed by better shoes. It's popular with a specific crowd and it doesn't seem to have stood the test of time, and to me that does not garner a classic status. But with a shoe like the Nike Cortez, it doesn't really matter, because while I think these things, to me the Cortez is a shoe that reminds me why I like creating videos for this channel. Because sometimes you find out that a shoe has a lot more story to tell. A story that takes some weird turns, and that is certainly true with the Cortez. Again, if I have to be honest, I wouldn't regard the Cortez as a classic sneaker, but again, it doesn't need that. The Cortez was Nike's first shoe, and a lot of people want to remember it like that. However, with history, you can't just throw out the bad stuff and pretend it didn't happen. It just doesn't work like that. However, it's this combination of both good and bad that creates something that you can almost call human. At the end of the day, the Cortez is just a shoe, but it's a shoe with an interesting story to tell. That's something you can't buy, no matter how much money you have or how big of a corporation you are. Those are things that just happens, and having a great story to tell is better than any kind of label that I or anyone else can put on a sneaker. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please leave a like if you did so, and subscribe if you want to see more. I'm SneakerKlev, and I'll see you in the next video.